Okay, let's take a look at a way we can resolve this particular problem. And it comes down to shaping our data that we're going to return. So let's close all of these open tabs to tidy things up. And what we're going to do inside our activities folder here, we're going to create a DTO. We used them before when we wanted to receive data from our clients, and we're going to look at them now and use them to return our data. So what we'll do in our activities folder, we'll create a class called activity DTO. And this is going to share a lot of the same properties, of course, as our activity entity. So I'm just going to copy all of the properties apart from the activity attendee and paste this into the activity DTO. And we'll just bring in system for the GUID and the date time. Now what we're going to do to return the attendees is we're going to create another class, but we're going to think ahead and think that eventually we're going to want to return the user profiles. And our user profiles are going to be what we return as the attendees. So what we'll do is we'll get a head start on creating another feature, and we'll call it profiles. And inside this particular folder, we'll create a new class and we'll call it profile.cs. And in our profile, we'll create a few properties. We'll have a property for the username, which is a string. We'll have a property, again a string, for the display name. We'll have a property, again a string, for the user's bio. I know we don't have this yet for any of our users, but we're not going to worry about that. We can return null as a string. We don't have to return a string, so we don't need to make it optional or anything. And we'll also return a string as the image here as well. And then what we'll do is we'll go back to our activity DTO and we'll specify an iCollection of type profile. And we'll call it profiles. Now profile, be careful when we import this because there'll be a few different options and we need system collections generic first. But when we import profile, be careful not to use the auto mapper one. We want to use our application profiles namespace to bring in profile. You will get an error if you try and use the auto mapper profile for sure. And because our profile class, we're going to use this for the user's profile and we're going to use it for the attendee information. If we return our attendees like this, then we don't know if the attendee is the host of the activity. So what we'll also do in our activity DTO is we'll add an additional property, which is going to be a string, and we're going to say host username. And this will allow us to identify which one of the attendees is the host of this activity. So what we want to do here now is return our activity DTO. Instead of returning our activity or a list of activities or a list of activity entities when we request a list of activities. And if we go to our list class, then what we're going to do here is instead of returning the activity, we're going to return activity DTO. And we'll need to update the handler here as well. So we'll say activity DTO there. And in the third place, we need to update it in the task that we're returning in the handle method. Now, of course, we're getting an error here because this is a list of activity entities, not a list of activity DTOs. So what we can use to help us with this is use AutoMapper. And we can create a mapping profile to go from the activity to the activity DTO. So what we'll do, inside our core folder where we've got our mapping profiles, let's update this and we'll add a new one or a new map that's going to go from our activity to our activity DTO. So we'll say activity to activity DTO. And we'll need to bring in application activities here. And what we can do, we can head back to our list class and we'll also bring in AutoMapper into this as well. So we'll add iMapper and we'll say mapper and we'll bring in AutoMapper and we'll initialize the field from parameter. And what we can do here is say that we'll add a new variable called activities to return equals, and then we'll say mapper.map, and then we specify what we want to map to. So in this case, we're going to be mapping to a list of activity DTOs. And then in the parameters here, we pass in the source object, which of course is going to be our activities. And then instead of activities here, we can specify activities to return. And of course, because our result also takes a type, we need to specify activity DTO here as well. And I'm missing a semicolon there. And we should get a clean bill of health from this method. Now in our activities controller, we shouldn't need to update anything in here because we're returning in our list of activities an iAction result. We don't have any type information inside here, so this should just work. And if we go back to Postman and we click on Send, then we get our list of activities, mostly okay, but our profiles appears to be null for everything, and also we're not getting our host username. Now Automapper is good, but it's not that good that it can work out properties that don't match any other properties that we've got. And I do want to call this attendees rather than profiles as well. But what we'll do is we'll take a look at Automapper configuration next and have a look at how we can configure it so it does return values for Lees.